sky was the color of ash as the town settled into evening, its wooden bones creaking beneath the weight of wind and silence. Dust rose in lazy spirals, turning the last light of day into a faded lantern glow. On the edge of the street, bound to a weathered post that once held horses, but now held her, a young woman slumped forward. Her skin was pale from hunger and exhaustion, her dress torn at the hem and stained with earth. To those who passed her by, she looked less like a person than a shadow unraveling. She was 24, poor, beautiful in the quiet way a wildflower is beautiful even as boots trample it, helpless before the eyes of those who would not see. They watched her, though most pretended not to. A merchant's wife quickened her pace, skirts gathered, as if poverty were a disease that might leap from flesh to fabric. Two men leaned against the saloon rail, murmuring with smirks, their laughter brittle with cruelty. Even children stared wide-eyed before their mothers tugged them away. The whole town seemed to agree upon one unspoken truth, that this woman had been judged and found wanting, and whatever fate awaited her, they would not intervene. She had not spoken in hours. Her lips, dry as old paper, parted only to draw shallow breaths. Inside her, memories played like faded lantern slides. Once she had known laughter soft and ringing in a home that smelled of bread and wood smoke. Once she had been promised a future, a man's hand clasping hers, the hope of a farm that would grow with their love. But drought had taken the fields. Sickness had claimed her parents. And the man, her first promise, had revealed himself not as savior, but coward. He had left her with debts and whispers that spread faster than fire. And now here she sat, abandoned in the open, left for shame to finish what hunger and despair had begun. The worst wound was not the hunger, nor the rope, but the silence. The silence of neighbors who had once broken bread with her parents, the silence of those who had shared her childhood streets. Their refusal to look at her fully was sharper than any knife. They all watch me die, she thought, her spirit fraying thread by thread. Her head dipped heavy as stone. The dust swirled higher, catching in her throat. She could almost believe she was already gone. Her soul half slipped from her body. The town blurred into shifting shapes, faces that looked and looked away, hands that twitched but never reached. She might have closed her eyes for the last time if not for the sound of hooves, steady and unhurried, entering the street. From the dim horizon came a rider. His figure was outlined in the copper glow of sunset, tall in the saddle, moving with the kind of quiet certainty that drew notice without asking for it. As he approached, dust parted around his horse's steps, as though the earth itself recognized the weight he carried. He was a man of 34, rich in the measure of land and cattle, strong in the set of his shoulders, handsome in the way of men who do not know or need to prove it. Yet none of these details mattered to her fading eyes. What she saw first was steadiness, the absence of hurry or disdain. He guided his horse closer and the townsfolk shifted uneasily. Some glanced down at their boots, some smirked as though waiting for a spectacle, and others crossed their arms, already rehearsing their disapproval. But the rider gave them no notice. His gaze, clear as river water, fell upon the woman bound to the post. He saw the ropes cutting her skin, the droop of her head, the whisper of breath that seemed ready to stop. And unlike the others, he did not turn away. The woman felt the shadow of his horse fall across her, a shade that cooled the burning of her shame. For a moment she did not dare lift her eyes. Better to believe he would ride past like all the others, better to remain unseen than to hope again. Yet something in the stillness compelled her, and slowly she raised her gaze. Their eyes met. There was no pity in his expression, no mockery, no calculation, only a quiet recognition, as though he were not meeting a fallen woman, but another soul weathered by storms. She tried to form words, but her throat gave only a rasp. Still, in her heart, something shifted, faint as the first stir of wind before rain. He dismounted with unhurried grace, boots pressing into dust. The murmur of the crowd thickened, curiosity threading with discomfort. He knelt before her, close enough that she could smell the leather of his vest, the faint scent of horse and pine. His hands, roughened by rains and work, reached for the knots binding her. Each tug was deliberate, patient, as if he were unbinding not just rope, but the verdict the town had laid upon her. The silence deepened. Even the saloon music faltered, a single note stretching too long before breaking. Eyes fixed upon him, upon her, upon the act of undoing what everyone else had accepted. Her wrists loosened, pins and needles rushing through them as blood returned. She flinched at the sensation, ashamed of her weakness, yet overwhelmed by the gentleness of his touch. Tears pricked but did not fall. She had thought herself emptied of tears. Why would he do this? Why would a man like him, wealthy, strong, unburdened, lower himself to untie a woman whose own town had abandoned her? The question beat in her chest, louder than her own heart. Her lips trembled, and at last words scraped their way free. They came not as a cry, but as a whisper, faint as wind slipping through cracked shutters. They all watched me die. His hand stilled on the last knot, his eyes lifting to hers. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Dust hovered mid-air, the crowd frozen, the sunset paused in its descent, and then he pulled the final rope loose. Her arms fell forward into his waiting grasp, and for the first time in what felt like years, she was held, not by duty, not by cruelty, but by choice. His grip was steady, grounding her as the last of her restraints slipped into the dirt. The murmurs swelled around them, disbelieving, scandalized, uncertain. She swayed in his arms, her voice breaking again, softer than before. "They all watched me die," she whispered. "But you—" Her breath caught. The words would not finish themselves, but the silence that followed was louder than any conclusion. His presence beside her, the ropes at their feet, and the eyes of the whole town upon them were enough. The cowboy lifted her gently, as though carrying something sacred. Gasps rippled through the street. For the first time since her fall, she felt the tremor of possibility. Dangerous, fragile, yet alive. He turned from the crowd, her weight secure against his chest, and began to walk. The world around them seemed to split in two, those who had watched and the one who had acted. Her pulse beat wildly in her ears, the echo of a life she had thought extinguished. She pressed her face weakly against his shoulder, her voice barely a breath against him. Why? The question floated into the dusk unanswered. His silence was not empty, but full, a promise hanging unspoken in the air. And as the last light of day bled into shadow, she realized that whatever came next would not be what the town expected. It would be something unthinkable. The night fell like velvet stitched with stars, and the town's noise faded into a restless hush. He carried her past the saloon lights, past the whispers that clung to every shadowed corner, until only the steady thud of his boots and the rhythm of his breath remained. She was cradled against him, weak but aware of the firm steadiness in his arms. Each step jolted her aching body, yet each step also tethered her back to the world she thought she had left. He brought her not to the fine house the townsfolk imagined a man of his wealth might keep, but to a cabin set on the fringe of town, half hidden by cottonwoods. Its walls were simple, built for shelter rather than pride, and inside lingered the scent of cedar smoke and leather oil. He lowered her onto a cot near the fire, where flames snapped softly and cast golden light upon the hollows of her face. She trembled at the warmth, and a shame crept into her chest as though she did not deserve it. He did not speak at once. Instead, he moved with unhurried care, setting a kettle upon the fire, finding a blanket thick enough to shield her thin shoulders. His silence was not cold but steady, as though words could wait until she could hold them. She studied him through half-lidded eyes. His features were cut in quiet lines, a strength born of labor, not vanity. His hands, large and rough, handled the blanket as if it were lace. When at last he broke the silence, his voice was low, shaped by patience rather than demand. "You need food," he said, "and rest." No other judgments followed. No questions about her ruin, no accusations about her past, only the recognition of her need, as simple and unadorned as bread. The first spoonful of broth scalded her tongue and she nearly wept, The taste was plain, but to her hollow body it was sweeter than any feast she could recall. He watched only long enough to be sure she would take another, then turned his gaze back to the fire, granting her the dignity of eating without scrutiny. That small mercy shook her more than any grand gesture could.